The system of Ophar's Gate was quiet, the kind of quiet that came before something bad happened. 12 warships from the Vren Compact hung in space, near the only jump lane leading out of the system. Their hulls were dark green and gray, built for war, covered in gun turrets and missile racks. Behind them, 3 small trade stations drifted, lights dimmed, engines cold. The people who lived on those stations were called the Doru. They were a short, soft-spoken species with large eyes and long fingers, known across the galaxy for building beautiful ships and for never fighting anyone. The Vren fleet had been sitting at Ophar's Gate for 6 days. They were not there to help the Doru. They were there to control the jump lane, the only fast route between 3 star systems. Whoever held Ophar's Gate held the trade of an entire region. The Vren Compact wanted that trade for themselves, and the only way to get it was to scare the Doru into giving up their stations without a fight. Admiral Thrakus Vo stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Cold Verdict, watching the Doru stations on his screen. He did not enjoy this kind of work. Thrakus was an old soldier, and old soldiers did not like bullying weak people who could not fight back. But orders were orders, and the Compact Council wanted Ophar's Gate under Vren control before the season ended. Any response from the stations? Thrakus asked. His communications officer, a young Vren named Ista, shook her head. No response, Admiral. They have gone silent. I think they are waiting for someone. Waiting for who? There is no fleet coming to save them. The Doru have no warships. Everyone knows this. Ista did not answer. She just kept watching her screen, the way a soldier watches a screen when they are nervous but do not want to say so. Thrakus turned back to the main window. Ophar's Gate was beautiful, in its own quiet way. Twin stars burned far away, painting the black of space in soft orange and pink light. The Doru stations spun slowly, their long solar wings catching the starlight like the wings of some great insect. It felt wrong to threaten such gentle people. But the Compact needed the trade lane, and gentle people rarely kept what they could not defend. Send the message again, Thrakus said. Tell them they have until tomorrow to agree to Compact control. After that, we begin boarding operations. Ista sent the message. On the Doru station, an elder named Miran Sael received it in his small office, a room filled with old books and dried flowers from his home world. Miran read the message twice, then set it down, and looked out his window at the Vren warships. They will not wait forever, said his assistant, a younger Doru named Fen. No, Miran agreed, they will not. Did the call for help reach anyone? The old alliance, the one from before the war? Miran nodded slowly. We sent it 3 weeks ago, to the humans. Fen's large eyes blinked in surprise. The humans? Do you think they will come? They are far away, and they have their own troubles. I do not know if they will come, Miran said. But long ago, before you were born, my grandfather helped a human trader who was stranded here, with a broken ship. My grandfather gave him food, fixed his engine, and asked for nothing in return. The human left a token with him, a small metal disc, and said that if the Doru ever needed help, we should send that disc with our message. I do not know if such old promises still mean anything to the humans, but we had no other friends to call. Fen looked out at the Vren fleet, 12 dark ships waiting like predators outside a den. I hope your grandfather was right to trust them. Far away, in a system most Vren had never heard of, a small ship prepared to leave dock. It was called the UES Solace, and it did not look like much. It was gray and simple, shaped like a long teardrop, with no visible weapons on its hull. No gun turrets, no missile racks, no armor plating thicker than what was needed to survive normal space travel. Compared to a Vren warship, it looked almost like a toy. Inside the Solace, Captain Elena Voss sat in her small command chair, reading the same message that Miran Sael had sent 3 weeks earlier. She had read it a dozen times already. It was short, polite, and desperate in the quiet way that people are desperate when they do not want to seem weak. They're asking for a fleet, said her first officer, Marcus Cole, standing behind her chair. He was a tall man, with a calm face, the kind of face that did not show worry, even when worry was the correct thing to feel. And Command is sending us. 1 ship. No weapons. Command is sending the Solace, because the Solace is what we have, Elena said, and because Earth doesn't want a war with the Vren Compact over a trade lane in a system we don't even own. So we go there with nothing, and hope 12 warships decide to just leave? Elena finally looked up from her screen. She was not young anymore, with gray starting to show at her temples, but her eyes were sharp, and there was something steady in the way she held herself, the way people hold themselves after they have already survived the worst thing that could happen to them. Marcus, do you remember the Ember War? I remember the stories. I was a kid when it ended. I wasn't a kid. I was a lieutenant on the Firebrand when the Scarn hit our colony at Meridian. I watched 40,000 people die in one afternoon because the Scarn wanted our system for their fleet supply lines, and I watched what humanity did after that. Elena's voice did not rise, but it grew harder. We didn't have the biggest fleet. We didn't have the best weapons. We had people who refused to stop, no matter what it cost. It took us 6 years, and it cost us almost everything we had, but we won that war so completely that the Scarn Dominion doesn't exist anymore. Not as an empire, not as a threat to anyone. Marcus said nothing. He had heard pieces of this history before, in school, in old news reports, but never quite like this, from someone who had lived through it. Word about how that war ended spread across a dozen star systems, Elena continued. Not because we told the story, because the people who survived it told the story. About what happens when you push humanity into a corner and refuse to stop pushing. We didn't ask for a reputation, Marcus. We earned one, the hard way. And sometimes, that reputation does more work than a fleet of warships ever could. You think the Vren know that story? I think everyone in this part of the galaxy knows some version of that story, Elena said. The question is, whether Admiral Thrakis Vo believes it enough to back down without us firing a single shot. Because we can't fire a shot, Marcus. We don't have anything to fire. The Solace left dock an hour later, its small engines pushing it out toward the jump lane that would take it to Ophar's gate. On board were only 9 crew members. Elena, Marcus, a young communications officer named Priya Nair, a doctor, an engineer, and 4 others who handled the ship's daily operations. No Marines. No gunners. No weapons officer. Because there were no weapons to officer. It took the Solace 4 days to reach the edge of Vren-controlled space. As they approached, Priya picked up the first sensor pings from Vren patrol ships far out on the edges of the system. They've seen us, Priya said. I'm reading 3 scout ships changing course to intercept. Let them come, Elena said. Open a channel when they're close enough. Keep it polite. The 3 Vren scouts closed the distance quickly, their engines flaring as they matched speed with the slow-moving Solace. On the bridge, everyone could see them now on the main screen, sleek attack craft with visible cannons along their wings, circling the human ship like sharks circling something they weren't sure was food or danger. A voice came through on the translated channel, rough and suspicious. Unidentified vessel, you are entering restricted compact space. State your designation and your purpose, or you will be fired upon. Priya glanced at Elena. Elena nodded, and Priya opened the return channel. This is the UES Solace, registered to the Sol Assembly of Earth. We are a diplomatic vessel, traveling to Ophar's gate, to speak with Admiral Thrakis Vo regarding the situation with the Doru stations. We are unarmed, and request safe passage. There was a long pause, long enough that Marcus began to wonder if the channel had dropped. Then the voice returned, different this time, quieter, like the scout pilot had turned away from his own microphone to say something to someone else first. Did you say, human? That's correct, Priya said. Another pause, longer this time. On the Solace's bridge, nobody spoke. They simply watched the 3 scout ships on the screen, watched as their formation shifted, watched as they began, slowly at first, then faster, to pull away. They're backing off, Priya said, disbelief in her voice. All 3 of them. They're not intercepting anymore. They're falling back toward the main fleet. Elena allowed herself the smallest smile. Keep us on course. Let's go meet the Admiral. Back at Ophar's gate, on the bridge of the Cold Verdict, Admiral Thrakis Vo received the report from his scout squadron with a stillness that worried everyone around him. He read it twice. A single unarmed human diplomatic ship, inbound, requesting to speak with him directly. Sir? Ista asked carefully. Should I put the fleet on alert? Thrakis did not answer right away. He was thinking of a briefing he had received decades ago, when he was young and had just joined the fleet, about a war fought far from Vren space, between the humans and an empire called the Scarn. The briefing had included recovered footage, images of human ships that should have been destroyed a dozen times over, that kept coming anyway. It had included interviews with scarred survivors, soldiers who had faced human boarding parties and never wanted to speak of what they saw. And it had included one line, repeated in every version of the briefing he had ever seen, a line that every young Vren officer was made to memorize. A human ship without weapons is not a human ship that cannot fight. It is a human ship that has already decided how the fight will end. Sir, Ista said again. Your orders? Thrakus looked out the window at the twin stars of Ophar's gate, at the Doru stations spinning slowly in the dark, at the long empty space where, soon, a small gray ship would arrive carrying no weapons at all. Recall the boarding teams, he said quietly. Hold all offensive action, and prepare a full honor escort for our human guests. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged confused looks. Nobody understood why an admiral commanding 12 warships would greet a single unarmed vessel with anything but confidence, but nobody argued either. Thrakus Vo had not survived 30 years in the compact fleet by ignoring old warnings, and something about this particular warning had never quite left him. The Solace continued on toward Ophar's gate, small and gray and quiet against the vastness of space, carrying 9 people, no weapons, and a reputation that had traveled farther and lasted longer than any of them fully understood. The UES Solace dropped out of jump 3 hours later, right at the edge of Ophar's gate. The twin stars filled the main window with soft orange light, and ahead, the Vren fleet waited exactly where it had been for the past 6 days. But something was different now. The ships were not in attack formation anymore. They had spread out, forming a wide corridor, almost like a path had been cleared for the small human ship to travel through. That's not what I expected, Marcus said, watching the sensor display. 12 warships, and they're just letting us in? They're not just letting us in, Elena said, studying the formation more closely. Look at the spacing. That's an honor escort pattern. I've seen it before, in old fleet manuals. It's what you do when you're greeting someone you respect, or someone you're afraid of provoking. Which one do you think this is? With us, Marcus, it's usually both. Priya's console chimed. Incoming transmission from the Vren flagship. It's Admiral Thrakus Vo himself. Put him through. The screen shifted to show a Vren officer, tall for his species, with gray-green skin and pale yellow eyes that had clearly seen many years of service. He wore a formal uniform, and behind him, his bridge crew stood at careful attention, watching the exchange with obvious tension. Captain of the Solace, Thrakus said, his translated voice careful and measured. I am Admiral Thrakus Vo of the Vren Compact Fleet. You are welcome in this system. I request permission to speak with you regarding the matter of Ophar's Gate. Captain Elena Voss, Elena replied. Thank you, Admiral. I'd like that very much. Might I ask why your fleet reformed into an escort pattern the moment we arrived? We're a single unarmed ship. That seems like an unusual response. Thrakus was quiet for a moment. On his bridge, Ista shifted uncomfortably, clearly waiting to see how her admiral would answer such a direct question. Captain Voss, I will be honest with you, since I believe honesty is the wisest path when dealing with your people. My fleet has studied records of the war your species fought against the Skarn Dominion. We are aware of what happened to fleets that mistook human caution for human weakness. I did not survive 30 years of service by ignoring history. Elena kept her face calm, though inside she felt a small flicker of something between relief and sadness. Relief, because the plan command had hoped for was working. Sadness, because it was working due to memories of a war that had cost humanity so much. Admiral, I appreciate your honesty. I'll offer the same. This ship carries no weapons because Earth does not want a conflict with the Vren Compact. We are here to talk, not to fight. I'd like to discuss the situation with the Doru stations, if you're willing. I am willing, Thrakus said. Will you come aboard the Cold Verdict, or would you prefer I come to you? Marcus leaned toward Elena and spoke quietly, off the transmission. Captain, going onto his flagship puts you completely in his hands. No backup. No way out if this goes wrong. Elena considered this for only a moment before answering the Admiral. I'll come aboard, Admiral Vo. I trust that a man who greets an unarmed ship with an honor escort understands the meaning of hospitality. There was the faintest suggestion of surprise on Thrakus's face, quickly hidden. You will be treated with full respect, Captain Voss. I give you my word. 2 hours later, Elena stood in the docking bay of the Cold Verdict, having crossed over in a small shuttle with only Marcus and Priya alongside her. The bay was enormous, filled with Vren crew members who stopped their work to stare at the three humans walking among them. Whispers passed through the crowd. Though the humans could not understand the words, the tone carried clearly enough. Curiosity, caution. In some faces, something close to fear. Admiral Thrakus Vo met them personally at the edge of the bay, flanked by 2 officers. Up close, he was even taller than he appeared on screen, with old scars visible along one side of his jaw, marks from some battle long past. "Captain Voss," he said, offering a slight bow, a gesture his officers had clearly researched as an appropriate human-style greeting. "Welcome aboard." "Thank you, Admiral." Elena returned the bow. "This is my first officer, Marcus Cole, and my communications officer, Priya Nair." Thrakus studied them each in turn, his expression unreadable. "You brought very few people for such an important conversation." "We brought the people we trust," Elena said simply. "Numbers don't win conversations, Admiral. Understanding does." He led them through the ship to a private meeting room, sparse but comfortable, with a long table and windows looking out toward the Doru stations. As they walked, Elena noticed the way Vren crew members stepped back from their path, the way conversations quieted as they passed, the way more than one set of eyes tracked them with open unease. It was strange, being feared by people who had done nothing to earn that fear from her. She had grown used to hearing about this reaction in briefings, but experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. Once seated, Thrakus wasted no time. "Captain Voss, I will speak plainly. The Compact Council ordered this fleet to secure Ophar's Gate. This trade lane matters greatly to my government, and the Doru stations, while peaceful, are also without any means to defend themselves or the lane. My orders were to convince them to accept Compact administration, by force if necessary. By force, meaning boarding actions, or by force, meaning destroying their stations." "Boarding actions only," Thrakus said, and something in his voice suggested this distinction mattered to him personally. "I do not make war on unarmed civilians, Captain, but my orders stand, and the Council will not simply abandon their claim on this lane because a human ship arrived." "I'm not asking your Council to abandon their claim," Elena said. "I'm asking you to consider a different way to secure it. The Doru have run this lane efficiently for over 60 years. They know its traffic patterns, its maintenance needs, its history. What if, instead of Compact administration replacing Doru administration, the two operated together? The Compact gets guaranteed access and a share of the trade revenue. The Doru keep their homes and their work, and nobody has to fire a shot or board a station that never threatened anyone." Thrakus leaned back slightly, considering this. The Council wanted full control, not a partnership. "Councils often want more than they need," Elena said, "but I imagine your Council would rather have a stable, profitable lane with a cooperative partner than an unstable one full of resentful workers who remember being forced into submission. Force creates enemies, Admiral. Partnership creates allies. I suspect you already know this, or you wouldn't have limited your orders to boarding actions instead of destruction." For a long moment, Thrakus said nothing, simply studying the human captain across the table from him. Then, slowly, something that might have been the beginning of respect crossed his features. "You argue like someone who has fought wars she did not want to fight." "I have," Elena said quietly, "and I learned that the wars you don't want are the ones you should work hardest to prevent, even after they've already started to feel unavoidable." Thrakus nodded slowly. "I cannot promise the Council will accept this proposal, but I will bring it to them, with my recommendation attached. That recommendation carries some weight, even now. That's all I ask, Admiral." As the meeting continued, discussing details of what a partnership agreement might look like, none of them noticed a smaller ship arriving quietly at the edge of the system, one that did not announce itself through official channels the way the Solace had. It was a Vren scout vessel, fast and stealthy, and it carried a single passenger who had been watching the situation at Ophar's Gate through intelligence reports for the past 2 days, with growing frustration. His name was Kalor Dren, a fleet admiral senior to Thrakus Vo, and he did not share his colleagues' respect for old war stories and cautious history lessons. Kalor had risen through the ranks during a more aggressive era of compact expansion, and he considered stories about the human Scarn War to be exactly that. Stories, exaggerated over decades of retelling, until the humans had become some kind of galactic ghost story, used to frighten cadets into obedience. Kaylor's shuttle docked quietly at a secondary bay on the Cold Verdict, away from the main entrance where the humans had arrived. He moved through the corridors with two of his own officers, men who had served under him for years, and shared his impatience with what they saw as unnecessary caution. "Thrakus is meeting with them right now," one of his officers reported, checking a datapad, "in the private conference room on Deck 7. "Meeting," Kaylor repeated, disgust clear in his voice. 12 warships, and our fleet admiral is having a polite conversation with a single unarmed ship's captain, as though she commands an armada instead of a diplomatic shuttle with a paint job. The council did send word that Thrakus has authority to negotiate. The council sent word before I arrived, Kaylor cut in. And now I am here, with orders of my own, which take priority over any partnership Thrakus wishes to arrange with these humans. I did not travel 4 days to watch a fleet admiral bow to a ship with no guns, because of stories his grandfather told him. His officer hesitated. "Sir, with respect, if the old warnings about the humans have any truth to them at all." "They don't," Kaylor said flatly. "I have read the same records Thrakus has. I have read the actual battle data from the human Scarn War, not the campfire versions passed between frightened cadets. The humans won that war through numbers, through stubbornness, and through the Scarn making catastrophic strategic mistakes. There was no secret weapon. There was no unstoppable force. There was simply a species willing to accept horrific losses in order to win, fighting an enemy too arrogant to adjust its own tactics. That is not the same as invincibility. That is exploitable, if you understand it correctly." He continued down the corridor, his officers falling into step behind him, uncertain but unwilling to challenge their commander further. "I intend to test this theory," Kaylor said, more to himself than to them. Quietly, and without Thrakus's knowledge for now. "If the humans truly are as dangerous unarmed as the legends suggest, I want proof before I recommend the council abandon a claim on Ophar's Gate that took considerable effort to establish. And if the legends are simply legends, as I suspect, then it is time someone in this fleet remembered that the compact does not need to fear anyone, human or otherwise." Back in the conference room, unaware of the second admiral now aboard the very ship they occupied, Elena Voss continued laying out the details of her proposal to Thrakus Vo, neither of them knowing that somewhere else on the Cold Verdict, a very different kind of test was already being planned, one that would soon put every old story about humanity to a very real and very dangerous trial. Elena, Marcus, and Priya returned to the Solace late that evening, feeling cautiously hopeful about the conversation with Admiral Thrakus Vo. He had promised to bring the partnership proposal to the Compact Council, and while nothing was guaranteed, it was more progress than any of them had expected on the first day. "He seemed genuine," Priya said, once they were back aboard their own ship and the shuttle bay doors had closed behind them. "Not just polite, actually thoughtful about it." "He is," Elena agreed, settling back into her command chair. "Which is rare enough among fleet admirals that I'd like to believe this will work out. But let's not celebrate yet. A proposal isn't an agreement, and a council isn't a single admiral." The Solace remained anchored near the edge of Ophar's Gate that night, close enough to the Vren fleet to maintain communication, far enough to keep some independence. Most of the crew settled into a quiet routine, catching up on rest after the long journey. Elena stayed on the bridge later than the others, reviewing the details of the proposal one more time, wanting it airtight before it reached the Compact Council's ears. She did not know that, at that same hour, Kaylor Dren was finalizing a very different kind of plan. Kaylor had spent the evening gathering a small squadron of 4 attack ships, pilots he trusted personally, men who had served with him during the more aggressive years of Compact border expansion, and who did not share the caution that had settled over Thrakus Vo's command in recent years. His plan was simple, and in his mind, elegant. He would not attack the Solace directly. That would be reckless, and if the old stories somehow held any truth, reckless could prove fatal. Instead, he intended something subtler, an interception, close enough to threaten, aggressive enough to provoke a reaction, but stopping just short of open combat. He wanted to see how the humans would respond when genuinely pressured, without the safety of an admiral's polite meeting room to shield them. They have no weapons, Kaler told his pilots as they prepared in the launch bay. Whatever reaction they show, it will not be through force. It will show us something else, something in how they think, how they plan, how they bluff. That is what I want to understand. Approach in close formation. Make clear that we could destroy them if we chose to. Do not fire unless I give a direct order, and I will not give that order unless they attack first, which they cannot do, since they have no weapons to attack with. His plan seemed sound to him. 4 armed ships against 1 unarmed vessel, with every advantage on his side, and no real risk involved, since the humans had no way to strike back regardless of how the encounter unfolded. The 4 ships launched quietly just after midnight ship time, moving away from the main Vren fleet formation, on a course that would bring them alongside the Solace, without passing through any of Thrakus' monitored channels. Kaler had arranged the timing carefully, knowing his colleague's crew would be running a reduced night watch. Aboard the Solace, it was Marcus who first noticed the sensor contact, sitting in the command chair during the late shift, while Elena rested in her quarters. 4 ships breaking off from the main fleet, Marcus reported quietly into the intercom. Vren attack craft, moving on an intercept course. This isn't the pattern we saw earlier. This looks aggressive. Elena was on the bridge within 2 minutes, still pulling her jacket on as she took her seat. Wake Priya. I want a channel open the moment they're close enough. Should I wake the Admiral's fleet? Let Thrakus know what's happening? Elena considered this only briefly. Not yet. If this is something Thrakus authorized, alerting him changes nothing. If it's something he didn't authorize, I'd rather understand what we're dealing with before we involve him. Let's see what they actually do first. The 4 Vren attack ships closed in fast, forming a loose circle around the Solace, close enough that their running lights were visible through the bridge windows without magnification. On the Solace's sensors, weapon systems on all 4 ships showed active and charged, cannons and missile racks ready to fire. A channel opened, and Kaler's voice came through, cold and formal. Human vessel, you are surrounded. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Priya glanced at Elena, waiting for instructions. Elena held up a hand, thinking for a moment, before nodding for the channel to open. This is Captain Elena Voss, of the UES Solace, she said, her voice calm, almost conversational, as though 4 armed warships were not currently circling her defenseless vessel. May I ask who I'm speaking with? I don't believe we've been introduced. There was a brief pause before Kaler answered. I am Fleet Admiral Kaler Dren. Your ship has entered restricted compact space without proper clearance, and you will submit to boarding and inspection. With respect, Admiral Dren, we received clearance directly from Admiral Thrakus Vo, who commands this fleet. I met with him personally aboard the Cold Verdict earlier today. Is there some confusion between your 2 commands that I should be aware of? Another pause, longer this time. Kaler had not expected the human captain to respond with such calm precision, nor had he expected her to immediately raise the question of command authority, exposing the very irregularity in his own plan that he had hoped to keep quiet. His pilots exchanged uncertain glances in their own cockpits, watching their commander's channel for some sign of how to proceed. Admiral Vo's clearance does not override fleet security protocols, Kaler said, recovering his composure. Power down your engines immediately. Elena did not raise her voice. If anything, it grew quieter, more deliberate. Admiral Dren, I want to be completely honest with you, because I think honesty will save us both a great deal of trouble tonight. My ship has no weapons. You know this already, or you would not have brought 4 armed attack craft to surround a single unarmed vessel. If your intention is to inspect us, you're welcome to send a boarding team, and my crew will cooperate fully and show you exactly what you'd expect to find. A small ship with no armaments and 9 unarmed crew members. There is nothing here to fear, and nothing here worth threatening. Then power down your engines and comply. I will not power down my engines, Elena said, and something in her tone shifted, still calm, but firmer now, carrying a weight that made even Marcus, standing beside her, feel the difference. Not because we intend any resistance, Admiral, but because doing so under an unauthorized threat, from a commander whose authority in this matter directly contradicts the Admiral I met with hours ago, would set a precedent I am not willing to set. If Admiral Vo contacts me and confirms this inspection through proper channels, we will comply immediately and fully. Until then, I would ask you to consider what it looks like, from where you sit. To have 4 armed warships surrounding a single ship with no weapons at all, over a disagreement about paperwork. The silence that followed stretched long enough that Priya checked her console twice to make sure the connection hadn't dropped. Kaylor sat in his cockpit, jaw tight, staring at the small gray shape of the Solace on his display, utterly unmoved by his ships, utterly calm in her refusal, and utterly correct in her observation, which was, perhaps, the most unsettling part of all. He had expected fear. He had expected panic, or perhaps a desperate attempt at negotiation, something that would confirm his theory that the old stories about humanity were simply exaggerations, built on stubbornness and lucky outcomes from a war fought against a poorly led enemy. Instead, he found himself facing a woman who spoke to him as though he were the one making a mistake, and who did so with such steady confidence that some old, uneasy part of his training whispered that perhaps she was right to feel that way. "You test my patience, Captain," Kaylor said, though the threat in his voice had lost some of its earlier edge. "I don't mean to, Admiral," Elena replied. "I only mean to point out that this situation is easily resolved. Contact Admiral Vo. Confirm your orders through him. If he authorizes this inspection, we will open our doors immediately, and you may search every corner of this ship yourself. I suspect you'll find it a fairly unremarkable vessel." One of Kaylor's pilots spoke up quietly over a private channel only Kaylor could hear. Admiral Vo is hailing us directly. He's asking why our squadron left formation." Kaylor closed his eyes briefly, the reality of his situation settling over him. His unofficial test had just become very official, and very visible, at exactly the moment it was least convenient for him. "Patch him through," Kaylor said quietly. Thrakus Vo's voice arrived on the same open channel that Elena and Kaylor had been using, sharp with an anger he made no attempt to hide. "Kaylor, explain to me immediately why 4 of my squadron's ships are surrounding the human diplomatic vessel without my authorization." "Thrakus, I was conducting a routine inspection." "There is no inspection I ordered," Thrakus snapped. "Stand your ships down immediately, and return to formation. We will discuss this privately, Admiral Dren, and I promise you, we will discuss it at length." Kaylor's pride burned at being reprimanded so openly, in front of his own pilots and the human crew he had been trying to test, but he was not foolish enough to argue further over an open channel. "Understood, Admiral Vo. Standing down now." The 4 attack ships broke formation and pulled away, engines flaring as they returned toward the main fleet, leaving the Solace alone once more in the quiet dark of Ophar's Gate. On the bridge, Marcus finally let out a breath he had been holding for the better part of 10 minutes. "That," he said, "was extremely close to going very badly." "It didn't," Elena said, though her hands, resting on the arms of her command chair, were not entirely steady either. "And it didn't, because we didn't give him anything to work with. No fear to exploit, no anger to provoke, nothing but calm questions that made him answer for his own actions instead of ours." Priya looked over from her station, still slightly pale. "Do you think that's the end of it? Or is Admiral Dren going to try something else?" Elena considered the question carefully, watching the retreating Vren ships on her screen. "I think a man like that doesn't give up just because his first plan failed. He'll want another test, a bigger one he can control more carefully next time. We should expect this isn't over, Priya. It's only just started." Behind them, unseen and far away, Admiral Thrakus Vo stood on the bridge of the Cold Verdict, staring at the same darkness where his colleagues' ships had just retreated, feeling the old unease from decades-old briefings settle over him once more, heavier now than it had ever been before. Admiral Thrakus Vo summoned Kaylor Dren to a private meeting the moment the 4 attack ships returned to formation. The room they met in was small and windowless, chosen deliberately so that no one else aboard the Cold Verdict could witness what was about to be a difficult conversation between 2 senior officers. "You endangered this fleet's standing with the humans," Thrakus said, not bothering to soften his words once the door had closed. "Do you understand what you risked tonight, Kaylor? I spent the entire day building trust with Captain Voss. Trust that could open a peaceful resolution to the Ophar's Gate situation, without a single shot fired, without a single Doru life put at risk. And you nearly threw all of that away chasing a theory about old war records." "I do not accept your theory, that a threat still exists," Kaylor said stiffly. "The human-Skarn war ended 40 years ago." The Skarn made mistakes. The humans capitalized on those mistakes. That is military history, not prophecy. We treat their reputation like it is some unbreakable law of the universe, and I think that is foolish, Thrakus. I think it makes us weak in negotiations we should be winning easily. And what did you learn tonight, from your test? Thrakus asked. Tell me honestly, what did 4 armed warships, surrounding 1 unarmed vessel, actually accomplish? Kaelor was quiet for a long moment. He thought of Elena Voss's voice, calm and unshaken, pointing out with quiet precision exactly how foolish his position looked from the outside. He thought of how she had never once raised her voice, never once threatened him back, never once shown even a flicker of the fear he had expected and, if he was honest with himself, had wanted to see. She did not react as a person with something to hide would react, Kaelor admitted finally. She reacted as someone completely certain of her own position. That is either extraordinary confidence, or it is something else. It is both, Thrakus said. That is what the old records tried to teach us, Kaelor, and what young officers like you always struggle to accept, because it does not fit neatly into how you measure strength. Humans do not need weapons to feel certain of themselves. Their confidence comes from somewhere else, from their history, from what they survived, from what they built afterward. You cannot threaten a species like that with 4 attack ships and expect fear. You will only ever get calm, and calm from an opponent who has already survived worse than you can offer them is far more dangerous than any weapon. Kaelor said nothing, but something in his rigid posture had softened slightly, the first crack in the certainty he had carried into this system. The Council will hear of this, Thrakus continued. I will not hide it, but I will also tell them that Captain Voss chose not to escalate the situation, chose not to make an incident of it, chose instead to resolve it through words alone, even while surrounded by 4 armed warships. That restraint, Kaelor, from someone with every reason and every right to be furious with us, is exactly the kind of restraint the old records warned us about. It is not weakness. It is a species that has learned exactly how much power to hold back, and exactly when to hold it back. Word of the encounter reached Elena the following morning, when Thrakus contacted the Solace personally, to apologize, and to request a second meeting, this time with the full Compact Council present, via secure transmission from their capital world. I owe you an apology, Captain Voss, Thrakus said, his voice carrying genuine discomfort. Admiral Dren acted without my authorization, and without Council approval. It will not happen again, and I have taken steps to ensure it. I appreciate that, Admiral, Elena said. For what it's worth, no harm was done, and I understand disagreements happen even within a well-run fleet. I'd like to move forward, if the Council is willing to hear the proposal. They are willing, Thrakus confirmed. In fact, Captain, I believe last night's events may have helped your case more than they hurt it. The Council received my full report this morning. They are very interested in understanding a species that responds to armed intimidation with nothing but calm words and a request for proper paperwork. Despite everything, Elena found herself almost smiling at that. Then let's give them something worth being interested in. The Council meeting took place that afternoon, conducted over a secure channel that connected the Cold Verdict's conference room to the compact capital, hundreds of light years away. Elena presented her partnership proposal formally this time, with Marcus and Priya supporting with data on trade projections and administrative structures that the Doru elders had shared willingly once they learned negotiations were underway. The Council members, 7 senior Vren officials whose faces appeared on a long row of screens, listened with careful attention. Some asked sharp questions about revenue sharing. Others asked about security guarantees, about what would happen if pirates or hostile forces threatened the lane under the new partnership structure. Elena answered each question directly, without exaggeration, without false promises, laying out exactly what humanity could offer and exactly what it could not. We cannot promise a human fleet will defend this lane permanently, Elena said, when one council member pressed the question of long-term security. Earth is far from Ophar's gate, and stationing forces here indefinitely is not something I'm authorized to offer, nor something I believe would serve anyone's interests well. What we can offer is a formal agreement, backed by Earth's diplomatic standing, that establishes clear terms of partnership between the Compact and the Doru. We can offer our reputation, for whatever that is worth to you, as a guarantee that we take our agreements seriously and expect others to do the same. One council member, An older Vren woman with silver markings along her jaw leaned forward slightly. And if the compact were to violate this agreement after signing it? What then, Captain Voss? What does Earth do, 4 days away, with a single unarmed diplomatic ship? The question hung in the air, and Elena understood exactly what was being asked beneath the words. Not a question about logistics, but a test, much like Kalor's test the night before, only wrapped in diplomatic language instead of armed ships. I won't threaten you, Councilwoman, Elena said. That's not why I'm here, and it never has been. But I will tell you honestly that Earth does not forget its agreements, and it does not forget when those agreements are broken. We are not a species that responds to broken trust with panic or desperation. We respond with patience, and then, if patience fails, we respond with whatever resolve the situation requires. I would prefer, very sincerely, that neither of us ever needs to learn what that resolve looks like in practice. I think you would prefer that too. The silence that followed was different from Kalor's silence the night before. This was not shock or discomfort. It was consideration, real and weighty, from people who understood exactly what history Elena was referencing, without needing her to say the words directly. The council will deliberate, the silver-marked woman said finally. You will have our answer within the day. The transmission ended, and for a long moment, nobody in the conference room spoke. Then Thrakus let out a breath he seemed to have been holding through the entire exchange. That was either the wisest thing I have heard said in this room, or the most dangerous, he said. I am still deciding which. It was honest, Elena said simply. That's all I aimed for. Word of the council session spread quickly through the Vren fleet, whispered between crew members who had heard fragments secondhand, embellished slightly with each retelling, the way stories always are. By evening, even Kalor Dren had heard 3 different versions of what the human captain had said to the council, each one slightly more dramatic than the last, though the core of it remained consistent enough that he found himself troubled by all of them. He requested a private audience with Elena that evening, something Thrakus was hesitant to allow given the previous night's events, but Elena agreed to it herself, meeting Kalor alone in a small lounge aboard the Cold Verdict, with only Marcus waiting quietly outside the door. I owe you an apology, Captain Voss, Kalor said, standing stiffly across from her, clearly uncomfortable with the words even as he said them. My actions last night were reckless, and I underestimated both the situation and yourself. Apology accepted, Admiral, Elena said. For what it's worth, I don't think you're a bad officer. I think you're someone who wanted proof before believing something you'd only heard as legend. I understand that instinct. I might have done the same, in your position. Kalor studied her carefully. May I ask you something honestly, Captain? Without it being repeated to the Council, or to Admiral Vo? You can ask. Was it true, what you said today, about resolve, if an agreement is broken? Or was it, as I suspected with the old war records, simply a story told well enough to sound convincing? Elena was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share with a man who, only a day earlier, had surrounded her ship with armed warships. Admiral, I was a lieutenant during the Ember War. I watched a colony of 40,000 people die in an afternoon because an enemy fleet decided our system was worth more empty than populated. I have seen what happens when a species decides it has nothing left to lose. I am telling you, honestly, that it was not a story told well. It was a memory, carried by people who lived through it, and passed on, so that no one would have to live through it again, because they understood what they became, in order to survive it. I would not wish that transformation on anyone, including your compact. I hope, sincerely, that we never have reason to test that story a second time. Kalor said nothing for a long while, and when he finally spoke, his voice had lost the sharp edge it carried the night before. I think, Captain Voss, that I finally understand what Thrakus has been trying to explain to me for years. And what's that? That some fights are won long before they ever begin, simply by making certain the other side never wants to start them. Elena allowed herself a small, tired smile. Now you're starting to sound like a diplomat, Admiral. Late that night, the Compact Council reached its decision, and the message that arrived on the Solace's comm system carried words that Elena had been hoping to hear since she first read Miran Sale's desperate call for help 3 weeks earlier. The message arrived just after midnight, ship time, and Priya woke Elena immediately, knowing she would want to read it the moment it came through, rather than wait until morning. The council has accepted the proposal, Priya said, still in her sleep clothes, datapad held out with both hands. Full partnership terms, Captain. Shared administration of Ophar's Gate, revenue split according to the numbers we presented, and a formal non-aggression clause protecting the Doru station specifically. Elena took the pad and read it twice, the same way she had read Miran Sayel's original message 3 weeks earlier, except this time each word brought relief instead of worry. Wake Marcus. I want the senior staff together before we send our reply. Within 20 minutes, the small crew of the Solace had gathered on the bridge, tired but wide awake now, reading over the agreement together. It was thorough, more thorough than Elena had expected from a council that had only heard the full proposal that same afternoon. It included provisions for Doru self-governance on their own stations, guaranteed docking rights, a review process in case future disputes arose, and language that, while formal and careful, amounted to genuine respect for a species that had, until 3 days ago, been on the edge of losing everything they had built. They actually did it, Marcus said, reading over Elena's shoulder. I half expected them to water it down after all that council deliberation talk. I think Admiral Vaux's report helped more than the deliberation did, Elena said. And I think honestly, Admiral Dren's mistake helped too, in a strange way. It forced the council to see exactly what kind of situation they were risking, by pushing too hard. The formal signing took place the next day aboard the Cold Verdict, in the same conference room where Elena had first met with Tharakis Vaux. This time, the room was full. Tharakis stood at the head of the table, Kalor beside him, his earlier stiffness replaced by something quieter and more thoughtful. Council representatives appeared on screen from the capital. And, most importantly, Miran Sayel and Fen had been brought aboard from the Doru station, the elder's large eyes wet with an emotion he did not try to hide as he watched the agreement take shape in front of him. I did not think this would work, Miran admitted quietly to Elena, while the final documents were being prepared. When I sent that message, with my grandfather's old token, I told myself it was worth trying, but I did not truly believe a single ship, without weapons, could change the outcome of something this large. It wasn't really about the ship, Elder Sayel, Elena said gently. It was about what people were willing to believe was possible, once someone gave them a reason to slow down and talk instead of fight. Your grandfather gave a stranded human traitor kindness, decades ago, expecting nothing back. That kindness is what actually changed this outcome. The ship just carried the message. Miran reached into his coat and produced the old metal disc, worn smooth with age, the same token his grandfather had given that stranded traitor so long ago. He pressed it gently into Elena's hand. Then I would like you to keep this, Captain Voss. Perhaps, someday, it will help someone else, the way it helped us. Elena closed her fingers around the small disc, feeling its weight, thinking of how many years it had waited quietly in a drawer for exactly this moment. I'll carry it carefully, Elder Sayel. Thank you. The signing itself took only a few minutes. Formal signatures exchanged across the table and across the transmission to the capital, but the weight of it settled over the room in a way that made the brevity feel almost strange, given everything that had led to this point. 12 warships that had arrived to intimidate a defenseless trading people now stood as guarantors of a partnership that protected those same people. It was, Tharakis Vaux reflected quietly as he watched the final signature applied, exactly the kind of outcome he had hoped for when he first ordered his fleet to stand down, rather than escalate against a single unarmed human ship. After the signing, Tharakis walked with Elena back toward the docking bay, where the Solace's shuttle waited. May I ask you something, Captain, now that our business is concluded? Tharakis said. Of course, Admiral. When you first arrived, before any of this happened, before you knew whether we would listen or fight, were you afraid? Elena considered the question honestly. I was cautious, Admiral. Fear and caution aren't always the same thing. I was afraid of what would happen if this went wrong, afraid for my crew, afraid for the Doru who had nowhere else to turn. But I wasn't afraid in the way I think you mean. I trusted that if we approached this honestly, and stayed calm no matter what happened, we had a real chance of ending it without anyone getting hurt. That trust came from history, Admiral, the same history your fleet studied in briefings. We've been in worse positions than this before, and calm, honest resolve got us through them. I had faith that it would work again. Tharakis nodded slowly, absorbing this. I think, Captain Voss, that this encounter will be studied in compact fleet academies for years to come. Not as a story of what your species might do if provoked, but as an example of what can be achieved when neither side rushes toward provocation in the first place. I hope you're right, Admiral. I hope this becomes an example other fleets look to, instead of another old warning meant to frighten cadets. They reached the docking bay, where Marcus and Priya were already waiting by the shuttle, the rest of the crew gathering to begin the journey home. Kaylor Dren appeared as well, arriving somewhat unexpectedly, standing a respectful distance away, until Elena noticed him and offered a small nod of acknowledgement. "Safe travels, Captain Voss," Kaylor said, when she approached. "I believe I owe you more than an apology, in the end. I owe you an education I did not expect to receive this week." "We all learn things we don't expect, Admiral Dren," Elena said. "I hope what you learned serves you well, going forward." "I believe it will," Kaylor said. "I find myself thinking, now, less about what a fleet can force, and more about what a fleet can build instead. That is not a small change, for someone who has spent his career believing the opposite." The Solace departed Ophar's Gate 2 hours later, its small gray shape pulling away from the twin stars and the Doru stations that would now continue spinning safely under a partnership neither side had expected to reach only a week earlier. Behind them, the Vren fleet remained in formation, no longer a blockade, but a guarantee, watching over a trade lane that would soon flow with traffic again, now shared fairly between two peoples who had almost become enemies over it. On the bridge of the Solace, as the ship prepared to jump back toward human space, Marcus found himself thinking about the entire strange week, still slightly amazed by how it had unfolded. "You know," he said, settling into his seat beside Elena, "when Command told us we were flying into a fleet blockade with no weapons, I thought this mission was either brilliant or completely insane." "Maybe it was both," Elena said, watching the stars shift as the ship prepared for jump. "So which was it, in the end?" Elena thought about Thrakis's honor escort, about Kaylor's 4 attack ships circling them in the dark, about Miran Sael's old metal disc now resting safely in her jacket pocket, about a council 7 light-years away that had chosen partnership over conquest because a single unarmed ship refused to be anything other than calm, honest, and unafraid. "I think," she said finally, "it was simply humanity, doing what we've always done best, not winning through force, Marcus. Winning through the kind of resolve that makes force unnecessary in the first place. That's a harder thing to build than any weapon, and it's the only thing that ever really lasts." The Solace jumped away from Ophar's Gate a moment later, small and unarmed and utterly unremarkable to look at, carrying 9 crew members, 1 old metal disc, and a story that would travel, in time, far beyond the twin stars where it had begun, reminding every fleet that heard it that some ships did not need weapons to be the most dangerous thing in the sky, because their strength had never been built from steel and cannon fire in the first place. It had been built from something far older, far steadier, and far harder to defeat. And far away, on Ophar's Gate, the Doru stations spun peacefully beneath the twin stars, their long solar wings catching the light exactly as they always had, safe now, and finally, quietly, no longer afraid.